Alrighty, everyone. Welcome to our 12th Slither. Um, we have had some really great and successful talks so far, and I know today is going to be one of them because everyone loves Dean and his Otterbein symmetry site. I'm really looking forward to hear what he has to tell us, and he's really looking forward to interacting with people and not just getting emails about the site's great and what people would like to see on the site. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dean. If you want to put questions in the chat, I'll certainly be happy to feed them to Dean as we go. I'm sure he's willing to take them as we go. And when he's done with his presentation, we'll sit around and chat about all things symmetry. So, Dean, take it away.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Chip, and thanks for the organizers. Yeah, like I said, I think this is the first time in a long time I've had a chance sort of to interact directly about the website, right? And given the current situation, just interacting with people at all is good to do, right? So just a little bit, I can introduce. So I am, as you might have guessed, a professor at Otterbein University, which is just outside of Columbus. So we're, Ohio State's about 15 minutes away. I've been at Otterbein for, I guess, 25 years now. But I wanted to get a quick poll here. So who has used some part of the symmetry at Otterbein in their class in some way? Okay, good. So who started? I was trying to get an idea, like who discovered it or started using it within the last 5 years. How about? Okay, yeah, couple. How about within the last 10 years? Okay. Anybody who's been using it longer? I know one person has been using it longer. Okay. Because I was looking back, I think I first posted it on Viper like in 2009 or something like that. But it's been around, as we were talking earlier, it's been around, or something's been around for over 20 years, which is sort of crazy. So I'm going to try and do this. I thought this would be funny. Let's see whether this works here. So can everybody see that? I should see if you can believe it, this is actually Netscape. Anybody know what Netscape is? Okay, so I don't know what was more impressive, that I got Netscape running on Windows 10. This is Netscape 6 from, I don't know, 2000 or something like that. Or that I found my original website from the early 2000s. So this is what it looked like 20 years ago. And there's some things that are a lot the same. It's basically what was the tutorial. So you've got, molecules that you can rotate. You've got different examples, and you've got symmetry planes that you can turn on and off, right? So this was pretty hot stuff back in the early or late 90s, early 2000s. So this was one of the stories, if you look at web development, right, is the technology keeps changing. And so this was the technology at the time, was plugins. Something called MDL Chime was the only way to get these kinds of things into a browser. Of course, that then, because being a commercial product, went away. It got replaced by something called JMOL, which of course was Java-based, which went away, which got replaced by JSMOL, which was JavaScript-based, which is what the website is currently. But I'm going to show today sort of the next iteration, what I'm hoping will be the next improvement, not using JMOL or JSMOL anymore. But anyways, I just thought this was funny that, and the animations worked too, right? You could rotate stuff around, and yeah, the biggest one, of course, was the improper rotation, right? So anyways, so let's see, I'm going to stop that window and switch over now to the current version. Can everybody see that? Yes. Okay. I think so. Yeah, you should see Symmetry Resources at Otterbein University. Okay. So if you want to know, this is, if you go to symotter.org and then type beta /beta, it's not a, I don't like necessarily share this publicly, but if you do that, it redirects to whatever my current working version is, which, you know, standard disclaimer, it may not work perfectly, but this is actually working pretty well now, except with older versions of Safari and older versions of Microsoft Edge, anything older than about a year. But anyways, so let's see. So in terms of talking about it, I was trying to figure out how to organize it. Again, you know, I'm preaching to the choir or whatever, and I think a lot of you are familiar with a lot of what's on here. So I'm going to try and focus on some things that are new. But of course, it includes the tutorial, the gallery, and the challenge, which have been around at least since about, I don't know, about 2006, I guess, is when I got an NSF grant to fund development of this, where it really expanded a lot. I think of the tutorial and the challenge as being the types of things that you can give to a student, and it can be relatively standalone. In other words, they can work relatively independently on those. So of course the tutorial has different, you know, different examples. The thing that you'll notice, if you're familiar with the current version, this newest version, if you look at the animations, they're actually quite a bit smoother, and some of the displays are a little bit nicer in terms of how they work. The progress bar or whatever is just a lot fancier now. But other than that, not a whole lot has changed in terms of what's here and what's been here for about, I don't know, when I updated to the current version. So the tutorial, again, like I said, is fairly standalone. And then the challenge, of course, one thing I did just add back was the flow chart that it's based on sort of disappeared. So I put that back in. But again, the latest version now has this flow chart that lets you do things that might be wrong. Okay, so that was one thing. I don't have version numbers. Maybe I should have version numbers on my website. But the older version would not let you follow the flow chart in a way that was incorrect. But this newest version, I guess I said that it had multiple C4 axes, and it just has one, of course. And somehow we got to the O point group when it should be C4V. So this is the nice thing about this is you can, let me pick something, let's see, yeah. So if let me just do something real quick. One nice thing about it is I can show the inversion center, and then you can, for some of the things, you can show that, oh, wait a minute, if I invert that, right, clearly I don't get back to where I started, and then I can reset like that. So, so that's something that's that wasn't available before. So that's pretty nice. One thing I would ask, the way the challenge is set up, there are literally, you know, virtually, you know, an infinite number of possible ways you can take the flow chart. And occasionally I'll find, like just the other day, I found something where the feedback, it wasn't wrong, but it wasn't quite right. So if you find any weird little things in terms of the feedback it gives, you know, let me know. It's sort of hard to anticipate every possible answer a student might give, and it tries to do the best in terms of giving that. So anyway, I actually want to spend most of the time talking about the gallery, because I think in terms of what we can do in the classroom, right? This is sort of the in terms of demonstrating things to students about, showing what is an improper axis, or what does this particular point group look like, or with some of the newer features, what's the vibrational analysis of this particular molecule. I think this has sort of the most options for demonstrating those types of things.
Hey, Dean.
Yeah.
Dean, real quick before you go into the gallery, I have a question.
Yeah.
Since I'm hosting, I get to ask.
Right, you can do that.
I just love the challenge.
Yes.
Would it be a royal pain in the neck if somehow there were an option of, just give me a random one for students and then have it ranked as like, give me a not too bad, a challenge, or wow, you're going to beat your head against the wall on this one kind of level sort of thing. I don't know if the rest of the community would think something like that would be a good feature, but for students to just go in and choose from this huge list of, I can give them, a smaller list, but it's a little intimidating, I think.
Okay. Yeah, and then rate difficulty. Yeah, that would not be sort of a not the Google I feel lucky button, but something like that. I challenge me, right? Give me something. Yeah. Okay. I'll that's one that wouldn't be too difficult, right? Yeah. Let me just think about where that would. So where would that?
I think if it just went, above the
just sort, a button up top here.
Yeah.
Right. Pick, or maybe a sort by difficulty, and then pick, something like that too. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll see whether I can do something like that. Yeah, that's great. So let's see. So looking at the gallery, and again, if anybody has a question or something you want to jump in, that's fine. I got lots of things we can talk about. And again, one thing that hopefully these are things that people realize are there, but over here in the gallery, as well as in the challenge, right, you can sort by different things. So you can, if you're doing a section and you just want to look at, organometallic or just organic molecules, that's an option, or you can just look at the alphabetical list, right? But I'm going to just go back to it defaults to by point group. So let me pick, I don't know, I'll just pick some example here, right? So one thing that it took me a while to get here, but I think it makes a lot of sense to me that the default organization of the symmetry operations, and there's now a priority to symmetry operations, since those are what essentially define the group, and they're organized by default by point group class. So if you pick, something like an octahedron, right, it's not going to show you, right, there are 48 different operations in this group, but they're going to be organized in what should correspond to the character table. Okay, so if you look at Cotton or even in the back of whatever textbook you use, you should find these, and then of course there's a whole set that of course all belong to the same symmetry class, but you can change that. So for example, sometimes the discussion might make more sense to talk about them in terms of the symmetry elements. So in this case, obviously, there are lots of different symmetry elements, some of which sit on top of each other. But you can just look at those by themselves as a group, or you can look at the mirror planes as a group. Of course, there's different types, right? Color-coded by whether they're sigma H's or sigma D's in this case. The one place where I like this is if you're looking at, say, something like a D3 complex, which you might see in inorganic chemistry, right? The only symmetry elements other than identity are proper axes, right? It's a pure rotational group. And so you can sort of show that, right? It's not going to show if they're organized by class, right? Because it's going to separate out the C3s and the C2s. But if you group them by element, they'll be all together. Or you can look at them flat, right? If you want to impress students with the fact that, buckyball has 120 different symmetry operations, then that can be sort of fun. But going back, if we go by symmetry element, yeah, we could look at something like this, which is another pure rotational, right? O symmetry. And so it's got nothing but rotational axes. So anyway, so that's something that, again, depending on your context, that can make sense to separate things out that way. Let's see, what else was I going to show? I was trying to think, what are some of the molecules that I really like? I like this one. And this is sort of a funny story. So this particular molecule, so this is tetrabromoneopentane. And the way this got in is I actually, when my mentor, my inorganic professor from Worcester retired, there was a symposium up at Worcester, and this is Paul Gauss, if anybody knows Paul. And so I gave a talk, and I talked a little bit about this. And my PChem professor, who had also retired, came up afterwards and said, well, you got to put this molecule in. So if you look, actually, let me sort here, sorry. So where is this tetrabromo? Yeah, is that it? Yeah. You'll notice that it's actually in here twice. And that's because it adopts this configuration, which is D2D, and this configuration, which is S4. And if you look at the names on it, this is Powell. David Powell was actually my PChem professor. So he was very excited to have these molecules added. So, but if you go, again, maybe this is obvious, maybe it's not, but if you go over here and click on Symmetry Info, it gives you a lot of extra information. Again, some of this is fairly new. The thing that I'm really happy with is it gives you the symmetry equivalent classes. So it looks at all the atoms and says, okay, yeah, there's multiple carbon atoms, but they're not all equivalent in terms of by the symmetry relationships. So for instance, there's 4 carbons that are equivalent and 1 carbon that is different than the others. And you can color by symmetry. And so that sort of makes it obvious that, all the hydrogens are the same by symmetry, but there's 2 different types of carbons. And it gives you other information like the framework group. There's a reference in the reference section on how that works, but it's not too hard to, right? It tells you that the origin is a carbon atom, and then there's some sigma D planes that contain 2 bromines and 2 carbons. The hydrogens don't lie on any symmetry elements. So it's a way of, right, just because your molecule has a particular point group doesn't make it equivalent, right, because of how the atoms either lie on or not on symmetry elements. Of course, it gives the vibrational representation for the whole molecule as well. And then it gives a reference, so I can click on this to go to the paper or click on this to go to the entry in the CSD. And now, with access structures, you don't have to have a license to the CSD to get to that, right? That's the ref code that goes directly to that. And I just added this. So all of this symmetry equivalent, the framework group, and the vibrational representation, this all comes from a program called SLiTHER. And so if I click on this, this is actually the raw output from that program. And so it actually is more information in here. It tells you extra, like vibrational, it's probably hard to read, but it tells you about the infrared and Raman vibrational. It tells you, I think it tells you whether it's polar or not polar. Trying to find that. There's lots of information buried in here. And it actually optimizes the symmetry if it wasn't. Most of these molecules are already optimized, so that's not all that interesting. But so anyway, so that's a pretty new feature. So if you want to sort of dig a little deeper and talk with your students a little bit more. So yeah, it's fun if you look at these two examples, right? If I look and color this one by symmetry, right? This is now the hydrogens are not equivalent by symmetry. The carbons are the same, and the bromines are still related to each other, but now in terms of the improper axis, right? If I align to that, now I can see how that has an S4 axis. And then of course it also has a C2 axis as well. So, so anyway, let's see what else was, oh, the other thing I was going to show that again, I'm just trying to think of how, how other people might use this. So if I go and I organize by, let's see, molecule type, organometallic, and say, I'm looking at the vibrational, I do a lab where we look at the vibrational spectroscopy of different metal carbonyls. And so you could look at this. Now this is of course, the full representation. So it's not gonna, if you're just focusing on the carbonyls, you might wanna go into a little bit different analysis. But again, you can go into this and look at the infrared and the Raman in this particular case. And again, the other thing that you could do, say, if you're looking at, maybe a C13 NMR, you could say, oh, and again, this you could explain in other ways, but you could say, look, in terms of symmetry, right, these carbons are not equivalent to this carbon in terms of the carbonyls. Although depending on the temperature, there might be, fluctuality. I don't know in this particular case. So that might be something else that you could look at. Let's see. I'm trying to think of other things. Again, in terms of what is here that isn't in the sort of official current version, the biggest changes are the graphics. So the way the graphics are displayed and the way the animations are done right now are let's see, yeah, are definitely improved over previous versions. With the JMOL or JSMOL, anytime you had a symmetry plane displayed, the animation slowed down considerably just because of how it was displaying that. So I think you can hopefully see that when I do that C4, right, there's no lag in terms of doing that, as well as the different reflections. That's sort of, oh yeah, there's one other thing. So the other improvement in terms of the graphics is in the, of course, there's different polyhedra. So we've got tetrahedron, we've got the snub dodecahedron eye symmetry, right, icosahedron. Again, the graphics are such now that you can display, all of the mirror planes and simultaneously say, oh, well, I want to see this particular improper axis, and it will still do that even with all this other stuff turned on. So, or I can show all of these and all of these and the inversion center all at the same time. So, and this still works, even though you can't really see it anymore, can you? So anyways, now it works. Anyways. So I guess at this point, that's a really, really fast tour of some of the biggest things that have been added, sort of things that I can do. I would recommend, I know Kyle Grice has put up an activity that he does with his students. That's a nice combination of here, look at this in the, do this molecule in the challenge, and then look at it in the gallery. And so I'd be interested in what other people are doing like that. And again, if you have ideas, I mean, I can come up with different ideas, but it always helps me if there's, like the suggestion for the give me a random selection. I think that's a great and relatively easy thing to do. So, but I think I'm going to just open it up at this point.
Well, I'm in awe, Dean. So let's go to the gallery and see what we got from anyone. If we have any questions. Anthony wants to know when the beta site is hoping to go live. I'm sure we're all wondering that.
Well, you can use it now. So like I said, if you just go in /beta, you can, it's perfectly usable now. And one thing that I would ask is, my plan is to probably, make it the official version, probably, somewhere around January 1st. Just, I don't really want to disrupt anybody who's in the middle of a class right now. So I typically try and do it either January or sometime in the summers for major potentially breaking changes. But if you want to, if any of you can go try it out, like I said, it's just symotter.org/beta. And if you run into things that aren't working or are funky, let me know, and I'll try and get anything like that cleaned up. I always hesitate to pull the trigger on this big of a change, but I think it's probably worth doing it in terms of the improvements.
I'm curious. I teach symmetry to freshmen. Mm-hmm. But I don't teach them improper rotations.
Right.
We do mirror planes, inversion, and rotations.
Right.
And of course, I use your program.
I think it's great that you introduced that so early. I think that's.
I don't know why it isn't more common. It's.
Yeah, I think sort of getting students to think in that way is something that I think it can help them later on, because they're if they go on, if they only go on to organic, they're going to have to think in 3D anyways.
At various times, I think maybe not for your program, why can you make a subset of your own molecules?
Yeah, that's something that people have asked about. There's a couple currently. No, I mean I've usually, if people ask, hey, could you add this? I typically, if I think it's unique or different. So yeah, one of the probably most commonly asked things is, can I just load up my own molecule? And I'm like if I have a structure, and there are some sort of technical challenges to that, mostly having to do with all of the I have the advantage, if I add a molecule, I can optimize the symmetry and align the molecule in a particular way. And I have a program that will do that, but it's not one that I can integrate. It's an old, very old Fortran program that I can't easily integrate into the website. But I'd like to. And like the Civa program will optimize the symmetry, but it won't align the molecule. So again, it's something that I thought about working on, but I haven't had time to do that. So
Adam, is your molecule there? One you made?
Yeah.
Which
It's the
one?
best molecule on the site.
yeah, where is it? I know it's here because it's it's this one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great molecule.
Jealous.
I think there were a lot fewer molecules on the site back in 2002.
Yeah. Yeah, there were, it was funny because one of the, a lot of the early molecules for some of the more obscure point groups, I got through the CCDC generates a collection of where they classify molecules in the CSD by point group symmetry, as well as a lot of other things. So I think it was this molecule here that was one of the early, right? Because there's not a lot of S6 examples, but this one was pretty cool, and I liked it. It's just a copper complex, but I put it on, and I'm looking at this, and this name right here, I recognized. And it turns out this is it's an Otterbein alum and the son of a professor, actually the professor that I replaced when he retired. That's his son, who's now he's a professor at UNC Charlotte, organic professor who happened to take crystallography and got his name on a paper as a graduate student. Anyway, so it's one of these like odd cases of finding a cool molecule with
Dean, you
with
mentioned this
connection. Yes.
This isn't running on JSMol anymore, or is it running JSMol?
The official version is what the beta version is not. So
okay. The reason why I ask is because one of the things I like to do, whether it's this or MolView, is right click and say export an image or even an STL file and say make a 3D print or something like that. I don't think you can do that here now that it's not JSMol. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that is
Okay.
one disadvantage. This is something called NGL, which is it's using WebGL, so web graphics language, and it's taking advantage of the graphics capabilities of the computer, which JMol does or JSMol does not. So it is a trade-off, and that's something that it would not be too difficult to add, over here, some ability to export coordinates for 3D printing or for other purposes. So yeah, that's a good point.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So this is something that I was thinking of actually, I think with Stephen's question a minute ago about your kind of own set of compounds.
Mm-hmm.
And this is probably pretty onerous in terms of like the way it would be set up. But if there was a way to select compounds that exist within the database and kind of spin up an iteration of the website that only has a list of 7 compounds on the left, that would be super helpful for something like a problem set or something like that, where then, you post it and say, instead of giving them the point groups and all that, like, here's these 7 compounds in the list, and kind of go top to bottom. So not creating your own input, but just like selecting from the existing input and creating kind of a custom viewer.
custom set. Yeah, that wouldn't be. So I'm just thinking, how would you do that? And it probably would be. Gotta think about it. Wouldn't be too difficult. What it would be is add some query to the URL. But I would have to set up some. Yeah, let me think about that. Yeah, that would, I'm thinking technically, certainly not that, if they're already in the database, already in the list of compounds, then it could be a separate page where you as the instructor say, I want this, 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 and this, and then it would generate for you a URL that would bring up a version of the gallery or the challenge that would just contain that list. Does that sound right?
Yeah. So essentially, it's like a custom spun up version of the website that just has a list of the compounds.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think that would not be that I can envision that as being relatively straightforward. I like that. Yeah, these are great.
Because I mean, we're all teaching online, so I'm sure we've all ran into this thing of like you post a resource and students after 10 minutes are like, I can't even find the problem set, right?
Yeah.
Like, well, how are we getting started? And so in this case, right, it's navigating to the compounds gives an awful lot of chances for students to get lost.
Yeah, and you only post so many screenshots, right?
Exactly.
I've gotten very familiar with the take a screenshot shortcut, right? It's like, this is where you go in Blackboard, right? Yeah, it's easy for them to get lost. Yeah. So no, that's a great idea. And I like ideas that are really cool and technically not, too difficult. I think that would be fun. And it might be, I could think of lots of ways to do that. So cool.
I'm not sure if you can do this or not. Can you show the molecules without people seeing symmetry? In other words, you display a molecule without looking to the side and seeing the axes?
So just like pick a molecule and have it not show you this information. Right. I mean, you can turn this off.
Okay. So you can. Okay.
I mean, so this little button up in the top right will show and hide that, but it, by default, it's going to be there.
Okay. No, but that's exactly showing molecules.
Right.
You want to show a molecule to the class.
Right.
Say, what symmetry do you see?
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Probably wouldn't want to start with this one though.
Yeah. It's is that cyclodextrin or what is that?
That is, isn't that alpha cyclodextrin? Yeah.
In fact, no, Dean. In fact, this whole thing with showing the symmetry in the equivalent atoms by color is really slick, and I'm wondering, that given this day and age where so many of us are teaching remotely, I wonder if there's sort of a common set of molecules that are made in laboratory that we analyze that could be a few compounds that could get added to the set that you have here. In the ionic group, there are a number of us, for example, that make the molybdenum bis oxo bis acac complex, and that's really interesting because you can use it to determine both how many MOO vibrations one should have, whether you have the cis molecule or the theoretical transversion. But also in the NMR, what's really neat about that is that the two methyl groups on the acacs are inequivalent, and that's really hard to show just looking at a crystal structure. And that tool that you have would be really wonderful to use that, and then I know when we look at things like for different carbonyls for their vibrational patterns, according to how they're now substituted. You have many examples that are analogous to common examples, but like I know like MoCO4 bispipridine, is a really common example,
Right.
or bis DPPE, right?
Right.
And
Yeah,
I know that those can be challenging, but
Right.
but could there be things that are much more simple that students could see as sort of an exact analog, rather than saying, oh, well, it's a different metal and it's a different ligand, but it's still, like cis bis substituted with 4 carbonyls or something.
Right. Yeah. What I'm, as I'm sort of listening and thinking, what I'm thinking as a possibility, like I said, I've been, I hesitate to add too many, right? I don't want to just have, 10 different examples of, a very similar set of molecules, but I'm thinking it should be possible to have sort of a hidden set of molecules, right? Ones that it knows, but don't show up on any list. But then with this idea of generating sort of custom sets, I could create a URL that, okay, here's a URL that gives you a gallery or a challenge for, for a particular exercise. And so you could, I could pre-generate some of those, or you could generate your own based upon a much larger list, some of which might be already in the gallery, some of which would just be known, but not, would be, like you said, better or simpler examples of, we do the DPPE molybdenum carbonyl example. So yeah, I think I'm liking this, because that was something I always struggled with was, here's, somebody suggests a molecule and it's like, well, there's already something that's almost exactly the same. So I don't really want to add that, but I could potentially make it as something that somebody could create their own list. And that could be an option there. So yeah, I'm liking this.
And Dean, and that's even something that we could potentially set up on the Discord or something.
Okay.
To say like, hey, are there molecules that people do in lab? And then we could see sort of, what are the more popular ones? So then you could sort of go and triage them in that way.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I love that. I gotta put up this is that's my favorite one to do by.
Let's see, there were a couple comments in the chat. Nicole was wondering if we could combine Taylor and my idea. So I guess it would be have your own list,
your custom list, and have pick a random one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea too.
And then I think Abby and Anthony kind of got all their comments out, and you covered it all. So, okay, we don't need to deal with that. Anyone else have any questions or suggestions for Dean, ideas?
What have you done for crystallography?
So I do have a site that does do, let's see, is it linked here? So I do have this, which is getting a little bit old, and it's one of these things that you can see. Yeah, is it loading? It says it's loading. There we go. So this is space groups. So you can load up. Yeah. So yeah, you can see that maybe it works. There we go. So this is for relationships. Like I can, if it's working, sometimes it takes a little while to load. Reload that. So if you click on a relationship, so this is the P21 upon C, and so it shows you in a very schematic way what the relationship for this is a sort of generic representation. This is an actual molecule that's in that space group, and so it'll show you glide planes, and then you can double click and it will actually animate glide planes. And you can see, right, atoms or molecules are numbered, so I can say what's the relationship between molecule 1 and 4, and say, well, let's see, 1 is related to 4 by a C, right? This is just a matrix, so that's 1 and 4 are related by the glide, whereas molecule 1 and 2 are related by this screw axis. And it does this for a variety, right? I can, have a bigger example here for a, P3 bar. So molecules are related by, either threefold axes or by other. Is that a 3 bar? Yeah. And some things don't work quite right. That molecule just flew off. Yeah. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Oh, yeah, there we go. That one works. So anyway, so that's one thing that I have for crystallography. That's sort of the most well-developed thing. You can also show the different crystallographic symmetry elements. But again, the challenges here, there's a lot more challenges with getting this. And you can see I've only picked sort of, right, there's a lot more possible space groups because they get very busy and complicated as soon as you get to some of the more involved space groups. And I haven't had time to dedicate a lot of time to this. This relies completely on JSMol for the crystallographic information. So this is not something I could easily translate to anything else. And there's still, like I said, there's a few bugs in it that I haven't figured out how to fix. But for basic information about space groups and 2-1 screw axes and glide planes, it's pretty useful, I think. I mean, I use it. Hopefully, be using it next semester. So,
do you teach crystallography to undergraduates?
I do. So I have I changed the title, so it's a structural methods. So we're a little more ecumenical, and I'm going to talk about some other methods other than just crystallography. But there is there's hands-on parts to it too. So it's a very general survey course, but I am scheduled to teach it next semester, so hopefully that will run. So.
Do we have any other questions or comments for Dean? Hopefully we've given him some good feedback and thoughts.
Yes, I'm excited. Just got to find myself some time.
We understand, and we certainly appreciate that you're excited about it, because we're excited about that beta version and all the new features that are coming out. for sure. All right. So we are planning to have one more SLiTHER yet this semester. I don't quite know the topic yet, but hopefully that will be announced soon. With that, I want to thank Dean for joining us today and giving us lots of great things to look at and think about.